My parents gave control of the family restaurant to my brother-in-law under pressure from my sister, but everyone is looking for jobs because his new ideas are starting to cause trouble. My family owns a small Italian restaurant that has been running for over 20 years. My parents started it when I was 9 years old, and I've worked there in some capacity since I was 16. Initially, my parents let me work weekends as a helper. I cleaned tables, swept the floor, and helped with basic preparation in the kitchen. Eventually, I started working more hours and learned how to take orders from customers. After graduating, instead of going straight to college, I decided to work full-time at the restaurant to help my parents. I worked in every position in the restaurant, starting in the kitchen, learning to make our pasta sauces with my mother's recipes. I spent years learning to prepare all our appetizers, salads, and desserts. Then, I moved to the main kitchen station, where I learned to prepare every dish on the menu. I also worked as a waiter for 6 months to understand what customers wanted and how to handle difficult situations. My parents taught me to place orders with suppliers, manage inventory, schedule staff, and manage the finances. When our head chef left 3 years ago, I took over the kitchen for 4 months until we found a replacement. When our manager left 2 years ago, I also took on those duties. Last year, my parents officially made me the general manager and started talking about me taking full control of the restaurant when they retire. The problem is my sister, who is older than me, and my brother-in-law. My sister never worked at the restaurant except for a few weeks in high school when my parents forced her to help because they needed the help. She hated every minute of it, constantly complaining about the garlic smell on her clothes and how tired she was after the shifts. She went to college and now has her own job. My brother-in-law worked at the restaurant for a few years. He was decent at some tasks, but he wasn't someone you could give a lot of responsibilities to. He also had some issues, but he was tolerated because he was family. About 6 months ago, my sister started saying that my brother-in-law should be in charge of the restaurant instead of me. She said my brother-in-law had experience and a business degree, which is true, but he got it from a community college. She also said it wasn't fair that I was in charge just because I was the son, when my brother-in-law was older and more mature. At first, my parents ignored these comments. They knew how much I had worked and how much I had learned about every aspect of the business, but my sister kept insisting. She would call my mom several times a week to complain, and the situation worsened when my brother-in-law started agreeing with her and making his own comments. 2 months ago, during a family meeting at my parents' house, my sister spent an hour listing all the reasons why my brother-in-law should run the restaurant instead of me. She said he had fresh ideas, which I didn't have, and that could affect the restaurant in the long term. My brother-in-law was there, nodding at everything my sister said. He added that he had been thinking about this for months and believed he could increase our profits by at least 20% in 6 months. He had an idea for a catering business, adding a lunch buffet, and starting cooking classes. My parents finally gave in to the pressure 3 weeks ago. They called me to the office and told me they wanted to try something new. They asked if I would be willing to step back for 3 months and let my brother-in-law take over as interim manager. They said I could use a break and that maybe my brother-in-law's ideas could help the business grow. I asked if they were serious, and my father said they thought it would be fair to give my brother-in-law the opportunity to show what he could do. I agreed to step back but told them it wouldn't be a break, I would be leaving for good and finding a new job. My brother-in-law started 2 weeks ago, and I've stayed away from the restaurant as promised. However, I've been getting news from our waiters and kitchen staff. The stories they've told me make it clear that my brother-in-law is totally out of his depth. During his first week, my brother-in-law decided to alter our sauce recipes without consulting my mother. He thought they had too much garlic and reduced the amount by half in the marinades and meat sauces. 3 customers complained that their food tasted different, and a regular customer returned their pasta to the kitchen because the flavor wasn't the same. He also fired our head waitress, Maria, who had worked with us for 5 years. She was always professional and knew how to handle difficult customers. She also spoke Spanish fluently, which helped us serve our Latin customers better. My brother-in-law fired her because, according to him, she didn't show enough enthusiasm for his new ideas to improve customer service. He replaced her with someone my sister recommended. This new waitress had never worked in a restaurant, so you can imagine how that turned out. My sister has been going to the restaurant almost every day since my brother-in-law took over. She acts like some kind of consultant, walking around with a notebook and observing everything. Yesterday, my parents called me to ask if I could go to the restaurant to help because my brother-in-law was having some problems with payments to suppliers. Apparently, he messed up this week's food orders, and we're running out of several key ingredients. They sounded stressed and asked if I could go for just a few hours to fix it. I told them no. Now my sister is complaining because I didn't help with the transition, and that's why her husband is having problems. She says I'm doing it out of revenge and because I'm jealous that my parents chose him. The worst part is that my brother-in-law has proven to be completely useless in just 2 weeks, which doesn't surprise me, but it does surprise my parents, because they really thought my brother-in-law's fresh ideas would be better than my experience. The reality is this: I've already started looking for another job, and I've had a couple of interviews that went really well. I think it's a breath of fresh air for me to gain new experiences and get away from the family business. Plus, my parents handed the business over to someone incompetent, and it's been one of the worst business decisions I've seen. Do you think I should go back and help, or is that ship already sailed? Update 1. In the end, I made the decision not to help. I've had follow-up interviews for a few job opportunities and decided to try that route, which meant my brother-in-law kept making more and more mistakes. First, our regular customers started complaining more frequently about the quality of the food and service. My brother-in-law kept changing recipes and procedures without understanding why we did things a certain way. For example, he replaced our dough with frozen dough that made our pizzas taste like cardboard, a sacrilege for an Italian restaurant. The financial situation wasn't much better by my brother-in-law's 4th week. On one hand, he was saving on ingredients, while on the other hand, he was wasting more and more money. Our food costs increased by almost 30% because he was buying expensive ingredients we didn't need, while we were running out of basic products like flour and cheese. He also forgot to pay the insurance premium, and we received a cancellation notice. His management of staff reached a critical point when he fired 2 other longtime employees. He let go of our cook, who had 4 years of experience, because Tony is a purebred Italian and couldn't stand my brother-in-law's nonsense. He also fired our most reliable weekend waitress because she refused to use his scripted greetings with customers. Although I think my sister was jealous, since she kept showing up at the restaurant. He also convinced my brother-in-law to spend money on new, more sophisticated menus, as my sister called them, even though they weren't necessary. The situation exploded during my brother-in-law's 5th week when we received complaints from the health department. He had been ignoring our standard food safety procedures, and an inspector found several violations, including improper food storage temperatures and a lack of cleanliness. We received a warning that could have resulted in a temporary closure if not corrected immediately. That same week, my brother-in-law made a decision that finally forced my parents to act. Without consulting anyone, he arranged for an expensive catering service for a wedding reception with 150 people. The problem was that my brother-in-law promised dishes we had never prepared before and offered a price barely above the food cost. He also scheduled the catering for a Saturday, which is normally our busiest day. When my parents found out about the catering disaster 2 days before the wedding, they panicked and called me. My father explained the situation and asked me to help manage the event so we wouldn't ruin our reputation. I told them I wouldn't help because I already had a formal offer for a new position. That's why my father had to return full-time to fix things. My father is still involved in the business, but much less as the years go by. Even the business has changed a lot since I took control because it had grown, and my father wasn't used to this. From what I know, the Catherine event didn't go very well. My father managed to deliver, but at the cost of losing nearly $1,000. After the Catherine crisis, my parents officially ended my brother-in-law's trial period. But instead of firing him, which was the right thing to do, they asked him to return to his previous position as assistant manager. And you know what he did? He refused. He said he wasn't going to accept a demotion after proving he could handle greater responsibilities. My sister supported my brother-in-law's position and told him that they hadn't given him enough time to implement his ideas, that this takes time. My brother-in-law and sister left the restaurant that same day and haven't come back since. Apparently, they're offended. My sister called my mom several times during the following week, demanding an apology and insisting that my brother-in-law deserved another chance. My parents told her no. But my sister is angry with them and has told them that they will regret it. My father has been trying to repair the damage caused by my brother-in-law, but I'm not sure if he has the experience to do so. For example, some employees have refused to return because they feel they were treated very badly by my brother-in-law. Others are ready to be hired for my new job. They're great employees and could be very useful to me in my new position. My father now faces the difficult task of rebuilding the relationships with our regular customers and restoring their faith in the quality of service and food. I see this as difficult because it's not like there aren't other Italian restaurants they could go to after having a bad experience with ours. We're talking about losses of over $8,000. It might seem like a lot, but restaurant profit margins aren't that high, and that could make all the difference in a bad semester. Another problem I know my parents have encountered is supply and equipment receipts that never arrived at the restaurant. After calling the suppliers to inquire about the missing items, they discovered that my brother-in-law had been having them delivered to a different address. It turns out my brother-in-law had been using the restaurant's supplier accounts for his benefit, buying equipment and supplies for his own catering business. He had been planning to open a competitor restaurant and was using the restaurant's money to buy what he needed to get started. The address where the supplies were being delivered was a commercial kitchen my brother-in-law had been renting across town. My father called my brother-in-law to confront him about the missing supplies, but he claimed it was all a misunderstanding. He said he was just temporarily storing some restaurant equipment elsewhere and planned to return everything. The next day, my sister called my mother, yelling that they were unfairly attacking my brother-in-law. She said he was just trying to help the family business by exploring expansion opportunities. She accused them of being paranoid and trying to make my brother-in-law look bad because we were jealous of his success. My parents have been trying to get my brother-in-law to return the equipment and supplies he took, but he's been avoiding their calls. My sister sent a text saying that my brother-in-law would return everything once they apologize for treating him badly. My sister hasn't spoken to me, which is fine because I didn't come back to face this drama. She still calls our parents occasionally to defend my brother-in-law's actions, but she refuses to acknowledge that she married a complete idiot, a thief, or both. I'm glad I made the decision I did because if I hadn't, I'd be caught up in this situation right now. I don't even know if the restaurant is salvageable at this point because I haven't seen the financial records with my own eyes. Update 2. Approximately 3 weeks after my last update, my brother-in-law finally returned most of the equipment and supplies he had taken from the restaurant. He brought it one day when my parents weren't there and left it all in our storage without any explanation. Some items were missing, and several pieces of equipment were damaged, according to what the employees told me. But my parents decided not to pursue the matter to avoid further family conflict. My sister has been avoiding all contact with our family since she returned some of the items. She stopped calling my parents and didn't attend my mother's birthday dinner, which deeply affected her. When my parents tried calling her, she wouldn't answer or would hang up as soon as she heard their voices. But then my sister started showing up at the restaurant again, not to help or apologize, but to cause problems with customers. The first incident occurred on a Friday night, one of our busiest days, when my sister arrived with 3 friends and demanded a table, even though we were fully booked. When our hostess explained that they would have to wait about an hour, my sister told her that she was the daughter of the owner and that there had to be a table for her. She started loudly complaining that the restaurant had gone downhill and that the service was better before. She spoke loud enough for the other customers to hear and made comments about how our family didn't know how to run a business. She eventually left without eating, but not before creating an uncomfortable scene that ruined the dinner for other customers. This pattern continued over the following weeks. My sister would come during peak hours and find reasons to complain about everything from the dining room temperature to the speed of service. She made negative comments about the food and told other customers that she knew of better restaurants in the area. She also started leaving negative reviews on social media using fake accounts. The situation worsened when my sister started directly contacting regular customers. She got phone numbers from old reservation lists and began calling people to tell them about supposed problems she had witnessed at the restaurant. She told them that she had seen mice in the kitchen or that the health department violations were worse than they had admitted. These calls were completely false, but they led several customers to cancel reservations or stop coming to the restaurant. My parents finally decided they had to take action when my sister's sabotage reached the employees. She called a waitress and told her the restaurant was in ruins and that she should look for another job immediately. My sister claimed the restaurant would probably close in a few months and that she would soon be out of a job. That employee went to work the next day and asked if the restaurant was really in trouble, which isn't entirely untrue, from what I know. My parents had to reassure her, saying there were no plans to close. I recently found out that my sister and my brother-in-law had taken their sabotage campaign to the next level. They filed a fake abuse and harassment complaint for the employees. That article was the last straw for my parents. But not quite. They had been hoping my sister would calm down eventually and apologize for her behavior. My father called my sister and told her that she was no longer welcome at the restaurant and needed to stop trying to damage our business. My sister responded by threatening to sue them for defamation. She claimed they had been spreading lies about my brother-in-law and demanded that we issue a public apology and pay him compensation for lost business opportunities. They consulted with a lawyer, who reviewed all the evidence they had gathered regarding my brother-in-law's theft and my sister's sabotage campaign. The lawyer told us that my sister's threats had no grounds and that, in fact, they had reasons to take legal action against her, both for harassment and for intentionally interfering with their business relationships. My parents decided not to file a lawsuit. I'm not sure why, but they authorized the lawyer to send a cease and desist letter to my sister and brother-in-law, demanding that they stop contacting customers, employees, and suppliers. The letter also warned them that legal action would be taken if their harassment continued. The worst part of this whole situation is that the restaurant isn't doing much better either, and it's not just because of my sister. Some friends I still have inside tell me that things are very slow, and my father can't do enough to improve them. Even if my sister stops bothering them, the business might still close its doors. I can't know how serious it is from the outside, but I can estimate it, knowing that the restaurant was profitable when things were running smoothly. But now, I don't think so, and it makes me a bit sad because I spent many years there. Now I'm working at a new restaurant, which is not Italian, and I don't plan to return after they kicked me out. I'm fine now, and I like that here the family and work don't mix. In my case, it turned out to be a bad combination. Update 3. About a month after the cease and desist letter, my sister and brother-in-law kept their distance from the restaurant and stopped their harassment campaign. Some things had improved at the restaurant, and I thought it might be saved. But a week ago, my parents gathered all the employees and told them that they would have to close the business because it was no longer profitable to keep it open. One of the employees told me that my parents were crying when they told everyone this and that they were apologizing to the staff for not having done enough. I feel bad for the employees because they are the ones who suffered the most from my parents, my brother-in-law's, and my sister's decisions. I've been trying to hire them for the restaurant I'm working at, but there aren't many positions available. Although my boss has offered to open a new restaurant in the neighboring city, where I would be in charge completely and would have the opportunity to hire staff. For now, it's just a proposal, and it's not guaranteed, but this seems like the perfect opportunity for me. I need to have a conversation with him when he returns from vacation. Now my parents have decided to sue my sister and brother-in-law, even filing a theft complaint against my brother-in-law. I think they've waited too long, and this shows what would have happened if I had agreed to return. I would have been stuck in the middle of all this, with my sister trying to ruin the business while my parents hesitated to take action until we finally reached these extremes. It's those difficult decisions to make in the moment, but when looking back, it seems like it was the right one. It spared me from the drama and also from parents who didn't know how to respond to a spoiled daughter. Update 4. I bring good news. My employer has given the green light for the second restaurant project, and we are already working to open that new location. He has given me a lot of freedom on the construction, and I'm working with a contractor as quickly as possible to open in a couple of months. Today I've been contacting all of my parents' employees to come work with me. Some are excited about the idea, while others have already started finding other jobs. Unfortunately, I can't pay them a salary right now until the restaurant opens, and they can't wait that long until it's ready. Either way, I will hire everyone who hasn't found work or decides to wait for the new restaurant to open. My parents have finally made the right decision, and besides filing a complaint against my brother-in-law, they also sued my sister and brother-in-law for defamation and damages after forcing them to close the restaurant. I'm a bit removed from all the drama because, although I still talk to my parents, they prefer not to touch too much on the subject of the lawsuit, as they seem to be struggling with the decision to sue their own daughter. I've told them that she showed no remorse for ruining them, so they shouldn't feel sorry for her. But that's how my parents are, soft-hearted, and that's why they're in the situation they're in, both looking for jobs because they lost the family business that had them semi-retired. Update 5. The restaurant has been open for 8 months and is performing better than expected. At least my boss is happy with the results. For those who asked why I didn't go ahead and open my own, the reason is that I prefer to save my own money and not get into debt to open a restaurant. Anyone who works in this sector knows how difficult it is to have a successful restaurant and how high the failure rate is. However, my boss and I are considering the idea of opening another one where we would be partners, contributing equal amounts of capital. I've also brought on all the employees from the family restaurant that I could, about 75% of the staff. It's like nothing has changed since I worked at the other restaurant, except that the owner isn't my parents, and he has no intention of bringing anyone with fresh ideas into the business. My parents have finally gotten a favorable verdict in their lawsuits and complaints, and my sister has faced the consequences. Both she and my brother-in-law will have to pay nearly $45,000 for damages related to defamation, theft, and other issues included in my parents' lawsuit. In addition, my brother-in-law received probation and a fine for stealing from my parents' restaurant. My sister also lost her job after being asked to resign when her trial became more public than her employers desired. For now, my father has accepted a job, while my mother has opted not to return to work.